This is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast.
Welcome in another edition of the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Murray, from the D here in downtown Las Vegas, Nevada. Please give us a rate, review, and subscribe as we continue to build up in those iTunes rankings, Spotify rankings, whatever you listen to us on. And you know who's been helping us out? He said he wants winners. He was sick and tired of losers. Not Mike Singletary. It is Matt Youmans. 13-3-1 the last 3 weeks, Matt Youmans. So let's keep it rolling for you, sir.
We want winners. Everybody wants winners.
Yes, indeed. We do want those winners. For Matt, 13-3-1, a 5-1-1 week last week. I know he's frustrated. I'm sure he will voice his displeasure for the late night game as they were unable to get to the window on that Boise State-Hawaii game. A late touchdown. Seemed like Hawaii was the right side the entire week. But still, hell of a week for Matt. 5-1-1 against the spread. Hey, nothing like a good old closing line value loss. Avery Johnson over under 61.5 rushing yards. I think closed north of 72, and he had like negative 10 yards. So a 2-3 week for me, and we like to call our spicy matchups. We all like spicy food here. He's been red hot. I've been mildly mediocre. 9-9 these last 3 weeks. But we move on. We've got week 9, Matt. It is a loaded week yet again, and it starts down in Austin, Texas. We call the biggest games of the week
The main course.
Yes, indeed. You know, we're getting closer and closer to Thanksgiving. I think we're about a month out, a little over that. And we are fired up for that main course on Thanksgiving. The game that is our main course, our turkey, our stuffing, however you want to define it this week. Number 5, Georgia, at number 1, Texas, Matt, 7:30 on ABC. And Georgia, they are in some rarefied air here. They are not used to being an underdog. They are catching 4.5 or 5 on the road at number 1, Texas.
I made the number 2.5, and I was, not that surprised that the number opened 3. But the fact that it went to 3.5, 4, up to 5, I bet Georgia +4, thinking that was the best number I was going to get. And then I had to bet a little bit more, +5 here. I'm in disagreement with some of the numbers guys who make Texas a 4.5-point favorite here. Of course, I was in disagreement when I took Alabama against Georgia. I was in disagreement when I took Oregon against Ohio State. So that doesn't bother me too much. You have to stick with what you believe in and stick with your own numbers and opinions. So here's where I differ on Texas. The Texas defense has allowed 13 points or fewer in all 6 games. But what's the highest rated offense the Longhorns have faced? Believe it or not, it's Michigan. You might think UL Monroe, but it's actually Michigan, and that's not impressive. So Quinn Ewers comes back from an oblique injury, out for the first time. He's out for a month. He comes back for the first time against Oklahoma a week ago. I thought he was pretty rusty. He was fortunate that the Longhorns are facing Oklahoma. And the Oklahoma offense, without the top 3 wide receivers and a freshman quarterback, Michael Hawkins, just could not move the ball. So even though the Longhorns win that game 34-3, he's still going to have to do a little bit more to impress me. And I think Carson Beck, even though I'm not the biggest fan, is by far the best quarterback the Longhorns defense has faced. Beck passed for 459 yards and 3 touchdowns a week ago. And now the Georgia offense, defense doesn't have the same elite talent, Tim, that I think it's had the last 5 or 6 years. But it's still a Georgia team that I think knows how to fight and grind in these type of games on the road. Bulldogs went on the road, played a tough game against Kentucky. Went on the road, played a tough game against Alabama. The Longhorns have not been in a game like that yet. And this is going to be the first time they're in a game like that this season. And also, who does this game mean more to? It means more to Georgia because the Bulldogs have already taken 1 loss. They really don't want 2 when you're looking ahead to the college football playoff scenarios. Georgia has been a favorite in 49 consecutive games. I'll take the Bulldogs as dogs for the first time in 50 games here at +5. And this is I'm going to say right now, my favorite play of the week. We'll see how it turns out, but I like it.
Well, a common play for you and me, Scott Van Pelt. I don't know if this will be a GPG, general principle game for him when he gives out his winners on his SportsCenter show. But for me, Georgia catching points, I don't know if it's square or not, but I look at the strength of schedule that you ran down for Texas, currently sitting number 82, and I think Texas is rightfully the favorite. You look at the look-ahead market, I believe was 2 at DraftKings over the summer. Georgia was 2 in this game. Yes, Georgia has not looked perfect. They have not looked vintage Georgia. When you think back to last week and the freshman coming in Michael Van Buren, part of, I don't know if he's part of the Van Buren boys. We didn't have to put up the 8 there to get out of any trouble there. A little Seinfeld reference, but Georgia struggled a bit against Michael Van Buren, struggled against Kentucky. But to your point, Matt, just looking at strength of schedule, they're 7th in the country, Georgia is, while Texas is 82nd. So, look, if Texas goes out there and puts it on Georgia, tip your cap, and they're the best team in the country. But I will take the points happily here with Georgia. And like you, I took 4 this week thinking it was going to go to 3.5. It did for a little bit. We saw buyback on Wednesday, and right now as we record this on Thursday, 4.5s and 5s are out there. So a common play for the two of us, Matt, here. We're both taking the points with the dog in the dogs, which is a very rare spot for them, as you alluded to. Haven't been an underdog since that season opener against Clemson in 2021, a game in which they did win and shut out the Clemson Tigers. All right, staying in the SEC, Matt, ABC, 3:30 on Saturday. Good old Rocky Top. They snuck out with a victory last week against Florida. I don't know why our guy Sunbelt Billy didn't go for 2, but that's beside the point. They win in overtime 23-17. And then Alabama, very fortunate to eke out a win at home against South Carolina. So it's interesting to look at these two teams, both very much still in the playoff hunt. Alabama arguably has the best win in the country so far, beating Georgia this year. But both since their premier win, Tennessee at Oklahoma, and then Alabama beating Georgia, have struggled a little bit. What do you make of this game, as Alabama right now is a road 3-point favorite against the Vols?
Well, I mentioned on this podcast 2 or 3 weeks ago that I thought Tennessee was being overhyped. I was not that impressed with the Vols when they went to Norman and beat Oklahoma, because that was a game when Jackson Arnold imploded with 3 turnovers, and Tennessee won that game 25-15. And just looking at the opposition that the Vols have faced early in the season, Chattanooga, Kent State, a lot of people get impressed when a team rolls up big numbers and they want to hype Nico, the young quarterback. But, your job as a sports bettor is to see through the hype and find value in numbers. And I thought Tennessee was getting really inflated. And I thought that going into the Arkansas game. Well, Nico's passed for an average of 160 yards in the last 2 games. And he's been wild with some of his throws. He looks like a wild pitcher out there, very erratic, not accurate enough. And I think this Tennessee offense has got problems. Look, when you're lucky to beat the Florida Gators at home, something's wrong. When you're lucky to beat Sunbelt Billy and the Gators in Knoxville, something's wrong. And I watched that game, and I thought, okay, I'm probably going to play Alabama next week. Now, I went back and watched the tape from the South Carolina-Alabama game, and that's pretty ugly. Jalen Milroe was as bad as I've seen him. He threw 2 picks in that game. The Tide all-around sloppy. Only totaled a little over 300 yards in offense in that game. It really got held down by the South Carolina defense. But, you sometimes got to try to turn that into a positive, too, because I think Kalen DeBoer and the coaching staff's going to kick some butt this week and try to clean up all those mistakes. And you should get a much better, cleaner effort from Alabama on the road than we saw last week against South Carolina, because this is 2 weeks in a row the Tide have struggled. So I think Alabama, I played this early in the week minus 2.5. I'll still say it's playable at minus 3. I knew this number was going to go up to 3 when I saw the 2.5 on the board early in the week. Tennessee was outgained, 360 to 312 by Florida. Too many red flags with Volunteers. I'll expect Alabama to play its A game or at least its B-plus game to get a win on the road here.
I don't know if you could smell that. We're in 2 different locations, but that wafting smell, that is the smell of my 18-1 Heisman ticket on Nico Iamaleava. You could go throw that one in the fire. That one is dead and buried. 150-1 at one prominent national shop now for Nico to win the Heisman Trophy. All right, let's sneak in another SEC game. Number 8, LSU. They win in overtime, a thriller down there in Baton Rouge. A winner for you last week as you took the points with LSU, and and now they got to turn around and they got to play Arkansas. This is the battle for the Golden Boot. And LSU, I don't know how you carry that effort over. Arkansas coming off a bye. Good news here, Taylon Green not on the injury report anymore as he was left the game early against Tennessee in that upset win. And how about this? Sam Pittman as a dog. This courtesy of our good friend and loyal listener to VSiN, Matt Grissom. 21-9 ATS as a dog, 6-1 ATS at home in night games, and 7-1 ATS after a bye. The problem is this, Matt. I gave it out earlier this week, vsin.com/picks. I think you did as well. I took 3 with Arkansas. The market's now 1.5. So it's not going to be an official play because I hate that we're not getting 3, but I do think Arkansas wins this game. Quickly before we hit a break, we got about a minute. Your thoughts on LSU Arkansas?
Well, first of all, LSU was a lucky winner for me last week. Had to sweat that one out in the fourth quarter. Hawaii was a very unlucky push, so that's the way it goes. But I think, off that emotional win in Baton Rouge, this is a fade spot of the Tigers. And I want to play Arkansas here, and I wish Matt Grissom had played Arkansas as a home dog against Tennessee a couple weeks ago. But Arkansas was a 3-point favorite, like you said, early in the week, now 1.5. At least we know Taylon Green, the quarterback, is going to play. So I am on the Arkansas side here, but it's tougher to recommend it at this number. I think you might even play money line now, expecting Arkansas to win the game, because I think this is a bad spot for LSU on the road off a big win over Ole Miss.
All right, let's call the Hogs. Not an official play, but for our guy Matt Grissom, let's get this one home. Woo, pig, suey. We got a lot of other games to hit on, including Jeff Brom as a home dog. Another spot that Matt and I agree on. We'll hit on that. Continue to work through Week 9 on the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast.
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast.
We keep it rolling here on the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. Just a reminder, please rate, review, and subscribe. It helps us out. Let's keep rising up those rankings, and hopefully Matt Youmans and me continue to give out those winners. More so, Matt, let's stay hot. We just went through the main course. Speaking of hot, I know a lot of you, I just envision a lot of you going through a drive-thru at a Taco Bell or a Chipotle right now, listening to this, and I'm thinking, I wonder what type of food they're eating. Probably some spicy food. I know Matt likes some spicy food. So let's get to what we like to call those caliente matchups.
Muy caliente. Spicy matchups.
Yeah, I really like this one, Matt. This was actually the first bet I made all week. The market moved with me and then went against me. So we will see where we land on this one. The market is actually right where I bet this game, which is Miami at Louisville. Louisville is catching 4.5, actually 5 now market-wide, so you can get a better number. I took 4.5. It's now 5. I'll let you start with this one because not many people know Jeff Brom and the betting tendencies of his teams better than you. And you think back these last handful of weeks where Louisville goes to Notre Dame. They go off as, I believe, a 7-point dog. That's a push depending on what number you got. You actually laid 6.5 with the Irish and got the win there. They follow up with a loss to SMU. And then last week, they win but don't cover against UVA. Miami, on the other hand, the last 2 games that they've played, they're fortunate to escape Virginia Tech after the Hail Mary. They come back from 25 down to beat Cal. They're coming off a bye, and now they head to Louisville, noon Eastern, ABC. Our colleague Stormy Bonatoni will be on the sideline for this one. Are you taking the points with your guy Jeff Brom here at home?
Yeah, I love home dogs, just like Brent Musburger in college football. Home dogs are the way I prefer to go. And, I'm not going to play every home dog, but very select ones. Big game, Jeff Brom's going to be one of them this week. So Louisville +5 here. And the Hurricanes, fortunate against Virginia Tech and Cal, to say the least, and a little help from the officials to get the 2 wins there. I'm not sure the bye week. I know a lot of handicappers are going to look at it and say, well, Miami's off the bye. That's got to be a positive thing. It's not always a positive thing. When you're winning, you don't necessarily want a bye week to disrupt your rhythm. So I don't think that's that big a deal, at least in terms of a positive for Miami. I know it's tough to bet against Cam Ward. He's got 300-plus passing yards in all 6 games, 400-plus in 2 games. But on the road, laying points against big game Jeff Brom, I think the Hurricanes are going to have to sweat it out again. And, you've got a capable quarterback on the other side. Tyler Shuck's got 14 TDs, 3 picks. Isaac Brown, 8.6 yards per carry. So you got a capable offense with the underdog. And, Tim, I'm fully aware that Louisville has not looked that good in recent games against LSU and Virginia. I know that's why a lot of people are down on the Cardinals. I was hoping to get 7 here when the number opened. I think it tells you something that the odds maker did not put this number at 7. So I'll take the 5 and expect a lot of fight out of the home dog in this one.
Yeah, let's take a little history lesson here with Jeff Brom facing top 10 teams. You mentioned last year as they took on Notre Dame and what was a brutal spot. And it's funny because I remember vividly looking at that spot. You and I talked about that spot last year when Notre Dame went to Louisville. The week prior, Louisville looked like complete and utter crap against NC State, and we stayed off the game, at least on the podcast, and Louisville went out and won that game by double digits, pulled away in the second half. 2021, Jeff Brom and Purdue beat Iowa as the number 2 team in the country, 24-7. They actually won that game on the road. They beat Michigan State 40-29. They were number 3. And then the most infamous one, Rondale Moore still might be scoring touchdowns in that one, 2018 over Ohio State, as Wyatt Tomczyk, our producer, smiling ear to ear as the Michigan fan here, thinking about the pain of Ohio State. So, look, it's tried and true with Jeff Brom. The market's going against us a little bit here, but I will take Louisville. And I was disappointed 2 weeks ago when I put them in a money line parlay, and they lost as a touchdown favorite against SMU. But these are those spots that Louisville and Jeff Brom seems to rise to the occasion. So give me the 5 with Louisville. I bet 4.5. Go get the better number, noon on ABC. Also noon, Matt, on Fox, we've got Nebraska taking on Indiana, and I saw a 7 on Thursday show up at the South Point, and that's what I've been waiting all week for, and I went out and grabbed it. So what I'm going to say here is I think the 7s will show up again, so do not bet the 6.5, or if you want to buy up to 7, that's certainly fine. It's juiced up right now at minus 15 with Indiana. Look, Indiana has been a absolute monster so far this year, both winning and covering, Matt. They've been destroying everyone. I tried to go against them once this year, and I had egg on my face as Indiana, despite losing the turnover battle 4-0, beat Maryland 42-28. But I want to point something out. On September 28th, when I went against Indiana, Matt, Indiana was laying 7.5 at home against Maryland. They're laying 6.5 or 7. 7 is what I bought at against Nebraska. Both these teams coming off a bye. Nebraska has been certainly more tested, playing Illinois, albeit in a loss, and Colorado. That win, I think, continues to look better. You look at Indiana so far, and we love the way that this season has started. We both cashed a season win total over on the Hoosiers. But FIU, Western Illinois, UCLA, Charlotte, Maryland, and Northwestern, I think this is their first real test. I think Indiana's good. They probably will win this game, but I will take a full touchdown. So once again, my official play will be 7. I think you will get a 7 at some point over the next 24 hours. Give me the Cornhuskers here. Both teams coming off a bye. I like Nebraska catching the full 7 on the road at Indiana.
You said a mouthful there. There's not much left for me to say, so I'm going to leave it at this. I would either bet Nebraska plus 7 or pass on the game. Indiana's been really impressive, but against a weak schedule. And Kurt Cignetti cracks me up because this guy is so cocky, the way he talks. And I think that rubs off on his team now, too. The Hoosiers are starting to believe. I know a lot of sharp bettors like that Maryland plus 7 against Indiana a couple weeks ago. It didn't work out. But the breaks kind of went Indiana's way in that game. I have not been too impressed with Nebraska so far. So I'm not getting fired up here about this Nebraska play, and I don't know if I'm going to bet it. As for right now, it's going to be a pass just because I don't trust the Cornhuskers right now.
All right, let's get to a home dog situation here where I'm curious your thoughts on this. Not going to be official play, at least based off of the bets we gave into Wyatt here earlier, but we've got number 24 Michigan going to number 22 Illinois. This will be the 3:30 Eastern CBS game. The market's betting up Michigan here, 3.5, 4-point favorites, and I understand the move. Illinois, very uninspiring performance last week against your Boilermakers, needing overtime to win it against what thought to be a corpse of Purdue. And Jack Tuttle's the best quarterback on this roster. They can actually move the ball through the air here. So I'm not going to play this game, but I think Michigan should take care of business. But Bert Bielema, I know his name's Brett, usually does coach well in this dog role. So a pass for me.
You know, I was thinking about betting Michigan in this game early in the week. I watched most of the Purdue-Illinois game last week. And Purdue always matches up well against Illinois. That, by the way, that was the Illini's first home win against Purdue since 2010. So that series usually goes Purdue's way. I think 8 of the last 9 it went Purdue's way. So you can't make too much of that. It's one of those matchups. You got to pay attention to the trends sometimes in those conference matchups. But I did see a lot of things I didn't like about the Illini in that game. Luke Altmaier didn't play well. The defense wasn't that impressive. And you know what? Michigan, with its running game and its defense, is probably going to go into Champaign and win this game. Early in the week when I looked at it, I thought about playing Michigan. I said, you know what? I think I'm just going to play Michigan on the money line here. So I think the Wolverines will get the win. They, off a loss, sometimes a bye can be a good thing. And I think Michigan's had some time maybe to get some of the problems fixed on that offense. So I'm not going to say they're going to come out passing the ball and looking like an air raid offense this week. But they got to find a way to use Jack Tuttle more effectively because the forward pass has got to be a part of it. This is not Red Grange in the 1920s. Okay, so I think Michigan can go in there, run the ball, play enough defense, and grind out a win. But, man, I don't want to lay the points with this Michigan offense. So give me Michigan on the money line here. That's probably going to be my play.
We'll carry this game over to the break here, but number 12 Notre Dame is visiting the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. This is not a road game for the Irish. Georgia Tech is, yes, located in Atlanta, but I can promise you one thing. 3:30 on ESPN, there will be more Notre Dame fans in the home of the Atlanta Falcons than Georgia Tech. The biggest thing to keep an eye on here is Haynes King, the quarterback for Georgia Tech. And I'll read you this tweet, and we'll give analysis on the other side of the break. This from Chad Bishop, as he said, Georgia Tech coach Brent Key tells us today that quarterback Haynes King is still, quote, day-to-day and will be a, quote, game-time decision against number 12 Notre Dame. We saw the betting market open around 8.5. It has ballooned out to 11.5. So we will see what this game has in store. Notre Dame dealing with injuries themselves as they lost their cornerback Benjamin Morrison, their top pro prospect, earlier this week due to a season-ending injury. Brent Key, 7-3 ATS as a double-digit dog down there in Atlanta. Does he get one against the Irish? Matt Youmans will give us his thoughts on this game on the other side, and we will take a look at some letdown spots in week number 9 that could lead to more best bets.
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast.
We set it up. Now let's give you some analysis. Notre Dame and Georgia Tech, 3:30 ESPN Mercedes-Benz Stadium. As mentioned, the status for Haynes King, the quarterback for Georgia Tech, up in the air. It would be Zach Pyron if he is unable to go. He did not finish the UNC game as Georgia Tech won that one 41-34. So, Matt, right now market sits Georgia Tech catching 11.5, neutral site game against the Irish. Does the Haynes King status worry you about this particular spot?
Well, I haven't bet the game yet. I've got this on my list, and there, we're 12s out there at DraftKings and some other places this week. I think if Haynes King is scratched before the game, you're going to see this number go up and maybe go up to 13 or 14. I don't want Georgia Tech here if Haynes King's not the quarterback, so that's why I haven't bet the game yet, but I think he's going to play. I'm just guessing. Now, the game-time decision thing, Tim, probably is gamesmanship. Why would you tip off Notre Dame to which quarterback you're going to play? And I think Haynes King is going to give it a go, but that's just a guess. And that's why I haven't bet the game yet. I want to see what's happening. And, we got some pretty good sources that might tip us off to what's going to happen before the breaking news actually hits on Saturday. So I'm hoping we can get the news before the public gets it. But if Haynes King is in, I like Georgia Tech in the points here. And I think Tech, is going to put a big scare into Notre Dame in this game, and if not, upset the Irish. I know that would upset you, but I think Tech will be live. If Haynes King is actually in, I think Tech is going to be live in this game, and that's why I want the 11.5. But again, I haven't bet it. That's a situation I'm going to obviously monitor Saturday morning, and who knows? We might get the news at some point during your college football tailgate show Saturday morning.
Well, let's hope that's the case. The VSiN college football tailgate show, by the way, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time. Matt Youmans kind enough to join us at 11:15 Eastern each and every Saturday. My gut tells me he's not playing, but that is unsourced as well. So we will see. One of us will be right. They play Virginia Tech next week, which you can argue is a more important game for the Rambling Wreck than their game against Notre Dame. But my gut tells me he doesn't play, but we will see. Brent Key, as mentioned, very strong as a dog. The final spicy matchup I want to mention, a game that, look, I'm mad. I'm mad at you, West Virginia. You had everything set up there for a big upset opportunity, and you let me down. And maybe I should just give some credit to Iowa State. But West Virginia back at it at home in another big-time spot. Fox, primetime again. They get Kansas State. They're coming off a loss. West Virginia, that is. Kansas State off of a entertaining win. Avery Johnson was a little bit banged up. DJ Giddens ran all over Colorado. Late touchdown to get Kansas State the victory. You can get a 3 if you do like West Virginia at home. I don't know. I'm a little snake bitten. Maybe I shouldn't. I should get it out of my feelings and look at West Virginia here. But it's a pass for me, but a lean towards the Mountaineers. But they have let us down, me and you, already a bunch this season.
Yeah, Mountaineers let me down against Penn State early, and I kind of bailed on the team at that point. I didn't jump on board last week. That home dog spot was pretty attractive against Iowa State, but I said, I'm going to stay away. Something's just not right about that game, and disappointing performance actually from the Mountaineers. I also thought they caught a couple bad breaks from the officials if you were watching that game. I know Neil Brown was upset about that at the time, and you would think you would get some home cooking, but they got the opposite. And West Virginia is not going to be on my playlist this week.
All right, let's get to, Matt, some situational spots that we like to discuss, and we appreciate. We got a rating, a review this week talking about home dogs and situational spots, and that's, I feel like, our go-to. And let's hit some letdown spots for week number 9. Arizona State coming off of the big win on Friday night, Matt, against Utah. Stormed the field. Kenny Dillingham bouncing around with the fans. The interesting thing about this one is you spoke about getting inside information. A little bird tipped me off that Sam Levitt might not play, so I took a little money line earlier this week. It got as high as 6.5 in favor of Cincinnati there at home. It has now trickled back down to 4. Jeff Sims, the former Georgia Tech, speaking of the Rambling Wreck, and Nebraska, quarterback. He will be getting the start here. I like Cincinnati. I don't know if I want to lay 4 in this spot. The other game we mentioned already, LSU and Arkansas. Both you and I like Arkansas in this spot. However, not at the particular number. Maybe a money line parlay, or maybe a money line play. Anything on Arizona State and Cincinnati?
No, you didn't give me the inside info, Tim, so I didn't get the bet down early enough. I thought we were friends, and I find out we're not, so I'm about ready to hang up the phone.
Oh, man.
I didn't get this information. I actually heard about it, and I was just a little bit too late to get the good number on that game, so I passed. And, Arizona State last week, I was not surprised with what happened there because Cameron Scatterbo and that Sun Devils team I thought was going to be live at home against Utah. But no, I didn't play that. I think one of the best situational spots on the board this week has got to be Arkansas as a home dog to LSU, though.
Yeah, there's no doubt. A couple other games I put on this list as possible letdown spots here, Matt. South Carolina, after almost beating Alabama on the road, they now got to go to Oklahoma. I know Oklahoma's a team that has bit you a couple of times. I bet them against Tennessee. Starting to get a little bit more healthy at that wide receiver position. A short home favorite here against South Carolina. And then I'll lump in this one as well. I don't know if I have the stones to take Maryland here, but this is a very good spot for the Terps. They're coming off of an embarrassing loss at home on Friday night. USC gets their guts ripped out in overtime, blow a 14-point halftime lead, get to the window for you, thankfully, and I tailed that play, so much appreciated, sir, as they cover the number. But USC now 3-3, Matt, and you've got to travel across the country. There's not going to be a soul at whatever they're calling Maryland Stadium these days. It used to be Bird Stadium. I think this is a weird spot for USC, but I don't know if I have it in me to take the Terps here in this spot.
I can guarantee you that Colin Coward's going to be giving out a pick on USC in this game, though. 5-8 in the last 13 games. That's Lincoln Riley's record. I don't know how you explain what happened. I know there were some fluke things that happened in the second half, but how do you get beat 37-10 at home by Northwestern? That's what bothers me a little bit about the Terps. And I know there were a lot of sharp bettors, like I said, that liked them in that spot against Indiana on the road. It's just such a tough team to trust. That said, Tim, if you look at it, the defensive injuries, not only that, Bear Alexander left the team, so he's not on the defensive line anymore. A lot of defensive attrition for USC, and that's something you got to pay attention to because that USC defense is not especially deep in the first place. So I think it would be home dog or pass, and as of right now, I'm going to pass on the Terps.
All right, I'm going to get a little weird here. A couple weeks ago, I took UConn laying 6.5 against Buffalo after Buffalo pulled off the stunner over then-ranked Northern Illinois. The Buffalo Bulls last week in another good situational spot played Toledo. Toledo was off beating Miami of Ohio in the MAC championship rematch. And Buffalo went out and bit Toledo. And now they're catching points at home against Western Michigan. I will take Western Michigan here. Give me the Broncos in a Buffalo letdown spot. The MAC is all whack this year, and I think the wackiness continues. Give me the Broncos short money line play. I think minus 118 is out there at DraftKings. I played minus 120. All right, Matt, let's look at a couple look-ahead spots here for week number 9, and I'll run through these and let me know if you're curious of any of these. We've got Vanderbilt in maybe the all-time sandwich spot of the week. I am at principle going to take Ball State here. Ball State, let me just say this. They suck. They are not very good. However, let's run through the last 2 weeks for Vanderbilt. They beat Alabama, ripped down the goalpost, walked them down Broadway. They go on the road. They beat Kentucky. Next week, they host Texas. And Diego Pavia was limping around after the game against Kentucky. A bad bet by me. I think this is a spot where if you're Clark Lee, get in, get out, get the win by 14-17. Ball State stinks, but you don't want Diego Pavia getting banged up. So give me chirp, the boys from Muncie, and I'm going to hold my nose on this one.
Well, I mean, I don't argue with that at all. In fact, the first thing that crossed my mind when I saw that game this week was, how crazy would that be if Ball State actually pulled the upset in that game? Because you got to think the Commodores are going to be asleep at the wheel. Off those two big games and with what's on deck, there's no way I would touch Vandy in this game. And, Commodores have been a great story. Diego Pavia and everything that's happened with Clark Lee and that team. But this is not a spot where you want to lay the points with Vandy. I don't care how bad Ball State is. We've seen a lot of bad teams pull big upsets. And it would be dog or pass for me here, too.
Just remember this. The Vanderbilt Commodores, yes, they have won back-to-back games over Alabama and Kentucky. They beat Virginia Tech. They covered, forced overtime against Missouri. They also lost to Georgia State. So worth pointing that out there when you look at Vanderbilt. All right, we'll hit a couple more look-ahead spots. We have a couple best-of-the-rest bets to get to, including some for and some against our armed service academies. And then we'll hit a best bet recap. Stick on here. It is the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast working us through week 9 of the college football season.
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast.
Putting a bow on on the show. It is the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. Thanks to all of you for rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you're getting your podcasts. If you see a stranger on the street, make sure you tell them that Matt Youmans is 13-3-1 over the last 3 weeks. Speaking of Matt Youmans, he's with me. All right, a couple more look-ahead spots here, Matt. We'll just run through these, and if you've got any thoughts, let me know. We got Texas A&M. They're taking on Mississippi State. Next week, they host LSU. Don't look now, but the Fighting Mike Elkos, they could make the college football playoff. They could be 10-1 going into a showdown against Texas in the final week of the season. The betting market has actually bet this game up to around 17.5. Navy at home against Charlotte. Now, they're coming off a bye, as is Texas A&M, but Navy playing Charlotte next week. Their biggest game of the season outside of Army, they take on Notre Dame at MetLife Stadium. Wisconsin on the banks of Lake Michigan there in that makeshift stadium. They're taking on the Purple Cats of Northwestern. Next week, Wisconsin will host Penn State. And then a game that our colleague, Jonathan Von Tobel, is very confident, not worried at all. I'm a little worried. UNLV heads up to Corvallis, and they are laying 6.5 now. The market taking a little bit of the Beavers here on Thursday. Still a 7 out there if you want to take Oregon State. UNLV, biggest game of the year, no doubt. Next week, Friday night at Allegiant Stadium. I'll be in attendance, looking forward to it. So of those 4 games and possible look-ahead spots, we already referenced the Vanderbilt game, which led to a best bet for me on the boys from Muncie. Any of those 4 games interest you in a possible look-ahead scenario?
I think Oregon State has to, and I really considered a bet on Oregon State, and I still might do it. But one thing about the Rebels, they've been a fast-starting team this season, and I was thinking, maybe I can get a better number here with Oregon State if UNLV starts fast again in this game. But with Boise State on deck and the high stakes in that Mountain West game next week, you got to think UNLV playing back-to-back road games is in a bet against spot here. So Oregon State's not bad either. It's not a good team. But the Beavers plus 7 at home would be the only side I would play here. I will probably have some sort of bet on Oregon State. DraftKings has still got 7. I see a couple books out there still with 7. And I might end up on the Oregon State side, but I have not taken it yet.
Yeah, Oregon State last week threw not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 interceptions to Nevada as the Wolf Space Pack got the victory at home there against Oregon State. So, yeah, I could see myself getting involved with Oregon State there. I would hope it doesn't happen. By the way, over at DraftKings, the adjusted win total on UNLV is 9.5, even money to the over. Essentially, will they beat everyone outside of Boise State from here on out? I thought it was an intriguing look, but this game would be the trepidation against Oregon State on the road. By the way, late night on the CW, 10 p.m. for this game up in Corvallis. I could see myself getting to the window on the Beavers.
One quick note here on UNLV quarterback Malik Williams, because this is such a big story. 3 weeks ago when he stepped in and Matthew Sluka deserted the team, I was looking at a chart, I think it was on Reddit CFB, if you want to look it up on Twitter. In the last 3 games, Malik Williams has the highest passer rating of any quarterback in college football since he stepped in for UNLV. I think Jalen Milroe at Alabama is on that list, a couple other big names you'd recognize, but that's how well Malik Williams has played for UNLV in the past few games.
Yeah, it's funny when you look at some of these teams, Matt, across the country, and I saw it on Wednesday night with Western Kentucky. Some of these coaches just flat out made the wrong decision at the quarterback position. I think UNLV is one of those teams. Western Kentucky turning to Caden Velkamp. They look like a much better team as they got a win on the road at Sam Houston State. So, some of these teams just made a mistake and started the wrong quarterback. And I think Michigan is probably one of those teams as well. All right, we mentioned Navy. I was tempted to take the points with Charlotte, the Fighting Biff Pogies, in that spot. But Navy coming off a bye seems like a decent spot for them, even though laying points with the Service Academy is never fun. But taking points with the Service Academy, well, that's sometimes where you can get intrigued. And let's get to a best bet for you. CBS Sports Network, 8 p.m. Air Force taking on Colorado State. Tough news this week for Colorado State as they will be without their most talented player, Torrey Horton, for the remainder of the year, and he's done at Colorado State. He's going to go pro. Air Force catching 7 at home. They are not very good, Matt, so are you plugging your nose and taking the Falcons here?
Yeah, I think it's the Falcons. This has got to be a game they've circled. This is a rivalry game, on the Front Range in Colorado. And Air Force has had such a bad season and is going to get beat down by the rival academies that you got to beat one of your rivals. And if you can beat Colorado State, you kind of salvage something out of your season here. And, the Rams, I don't think should be laying 7 or 7.5 on the road. In fact, I took 7.5 with Air Force. And that was not an easy bet to make this week, but sometimes you got to hold your nose and take some points with some of these ugly home dogs. And, hey, let's face it, Air Force is not incapable. The Falcons went on the road to New Mexico, rolled up 325 rushing yards last week. Also, you got a couple of quarterbacks here in Quentin Hayes and Josh Johnson who can move the offense. So it's not like Air Force is not going to be able to move the ball against Colorado State, which doesn't have a lockdown defense. But for me, what means the most is one of the things you just mentioned, and that's Torrey Horton, top wide receiver for Colorado State the last 2 years, out with a knee injury, and he's done. So the Rams are going to limp in. They're going to limp in down there to Colorado Springs in the Air Force Academy with a weak coach, a weak quarterback, and without your top wide receiver. And you're going to be laying 7. No, I'll take the home dog here. I hope the Falcons show up. I think they will.
All right, the other service academy that we have yet to mention, by the way, Army and Navy ranked at the same time for the first time since 1960. Army number 23, they're 6-0 straight up, 6-0 ATS, covering by 14.6 points per game. So why would anyone bet against them? Because the market's probably gone a little too far. Give me the points with East Carolina, another Hold Your Nose special up on the Hudson River at Mikey Stadium. I'm doing it. I'm going in front of the Goliath that is Army. East Carolina coming off a bye, fresh off of a butt whipping at the hands of Charlotte before that bye. But let's look at the teams that Army has faced so far. Lehigh, Florida Atlantic, Rice, Temple. By the way, 3 straight wins over Owls. Pretty impressive. Tulsa, UAB. I was texting with a pretty sharp bettor earlier this week, and he said none of those teams are in his top 100 of defenses. So I will plug my nose, and I will take the points with East Carolina. I'll say this, folks. I grabbed 17 earlier this week. It's 16.5 right now. I think we're going to get back to 17. People can't get enough of this Army team. They're undefeated against the spread, as mentioned. So I would wait. It'll be an official play here on the podcast at 16, but I would wait. I think you do get that 17. And, service academies as big dogs, very profitable. As big favorites, not so profitable, even though Army easily covered against the Fighting Trent Dilfers last week. All right, Matt, let's do what we do to wrap up this show and recap all of our bets the only way we know how.
Best Bets Recap.
All right, Matt, let's roll with your best bets recap. You've got 5 plays and a 1 tentative based off of the status of Haynes King.
Yeah, we're going to roll with the big dog, Georgia Bulldogs. Favored 49 consecutive games, now catching 5 points in Austin. Georgia +5. How about big game Jeff Brom? Catching 5 at home against Miami Hurricanes, who are lucky to be undefeated at this point. I kind of prefer this to be a night game, and it's not, but I'll still take the 5 with big game Brom against the Canes. Also going to go with Alabama. I know it was a sloppy performance last week by Jalen Milroe in the Tide against South Carolina, but that's okay. That gives the coaching staff a lot of stuff to clean up this week in practice. I think you'll see a much better performance out of Milroe. Plus, I think Tennessee's a bet against team right now and has been the past couple weeks. So let's go Alabama -3. Got to throw a favorite in there, right? Just talked about Air Force +7. Falcons at home against Colorado State. I like that spot for the Mountain West home dog. And Georgia Tech, this is going to be a game-time decision for me, too. Hopefully a few hours before game time we get the news. But I like Georgia Tech +11.5 against Notre Dame. That game is at the, Tim, I think that's the Mercedes-Benz Dome or the stadium, whatever it is, in Atlanta. So let's take the points there with Georgia Tech. If Haynes King is playing, if he's not going to play, if we find out he's not playing, I'm not betting the Tech side in that one. So I'll give you another play to throw in there to take its place if Georgia Tech's not playing. That's going to be Michigan on the money line against Illinois.
All right, there it is. Michigan on the money line. We'll run through my plays against the clock here, and we will go Georgia plus the 5, Louisville plus 4.5, Ball State plus 25.5, East Carolina plus 16. I would wait. I think you get a 17 there. Western Michigan on the money line, and a bonus play. I like Arkansas. I took the 3. They're going to win outright. For Matt, I'm Tim. This has been the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast.
Thanks for watching, but don't let the betting insights end here. If you want an extra edge this football season, you can get a month of VSiN Pro right now absolutely free. That means access to our betting insights, analysis, and tools like our betting splits at 0 cost to you. Click the link in the description to sign up.